the most frustrating things for Conservatives in this country is what party is going to fight for you? What happened to the Liberals for a start? In Victoria, the Liberals there are even backing a treaty with Aborigines, dividing us by race, calling for even tougher emissions cuts than the Albanese government does. In New South Wales, the Liberals this week actually elected Matt Keane as Deputy Leader. I mean, this guy's right on board the global warming scare. He's right on board with forcing businesses to have quotas for women. He even attacked the 7 Manly players who refused to wear the pride colours on their jerseys. But, you know, I'm sort of an optimist, and I kind of thought even, after the defeat of the coalition government in Canberra, at last, here's the chance. Peter Dutton now in charge. Go Conservative. Give us, finally, a choice. And I thought it might even be a piece of cake with many of the left-wing Liberals voted out. Trent Zimmerman, Dave Sharma, others. And coming into the parliament, even better, brave Conservatives such as Jacinta Nampijinpa Price. This, I thought, could be the turning point. And I don't think I was alone. Instead, well, take Price. This woman is the real deal. She is brilliant. She's articulate, brave, principled. Who knows? With hard work and experience, she could even become our first Prime Minister of Aboriginal descent, or certainly a senior minister, a figure of unity.
We must encourage all Australians to recognise and take pride in our national identity, as historically we have done effortlessly. Without a sense of unity and pride, we leave ourselves vulnerable to external forces that would delight in our demise.
But you know, what I think is so sad is that this coalition has left Price twisting in the wind, exposed, alone. And if this goes on much longer, they could help destroy her. Now, Price, as you know, if you've been watching this show over the years, is a fierce opponent of Labor's plan for a kind of Aboriginal-only parliament, written forever into our constitution. She's against the new racism. So she's against this plan in principle because it does divide us by race. Now, this Labor plan to treat us as members of some racial tribe and not as just individuals, it's not just evil, it's fundamentally against liberal principles. And Price would be perfect as the coalition spokesman for Indigenous Australians leading the fight. Now, I know she's totally new to Parliament. It'd be a risk to promote her straight to the front bench before she's learned the ropes. I got that. I mean, but the Liberals did do it with Peter Costello when he first got in. But I think this is a risk worth taking because see how Price is already dominating this debate. But unfortunately, the coalition is given that job of representing Aboriginal Australians, not to this Aboriginal Conservative, but to this white liberal leftist, Julian Leeser, who is actually for the Aboriginal-only parliament that Price is against. Now, worse, coalition leader Peter Dutton today would not even say that an Aboriginal-only parliament in our constitution is actually wrong in principle. It's an insult to our common humanity, to our common identity as Australians.
I'm listening respectfully to what the government has to say. I'm approaching it with an open mind. I'm listening to the contributions made when the Prime Minister says that it will only be a voice on public policy issues that affect Indigenous Australians. I don't have the answer yet as to what that means because you know, every Australian is interested in defence matters or education matters or public health matters, etc. And the government will provide the answers to those in due course, and we can make our response off the back of that.
Now, I know Peter Dutton's actually a smart guy and maybe he's just biding his time, knowing that it's going to have to oppose this in the end. But, you know, who knows? Labor could maybe talk itself into trouble before then, blow itself up. Who knows? But the Liberals must oppose this in principle. So this is not an argument about, you know, well, let's wait for the details. No, it's wrong in principle. And while Dutton doesn't oppose this apartheid, he and the rest of his team, They're just leaving Price out there as if she's on her own, speaking for no one but herself, often a frolic. They've exposed her. And you've now seen how the white left has gone for Price, made an example of her, trying to isolate her and frighten off anyone else who might speak up against Labor's plan. I'll have much more to say about that later in the show. But ask yourself, how many of Dutton's front benchers have stood by Price and said, well, she's actually right, she's not alone? And by their silence, they are weakening her. They're making her argument seem, right out there, or, And that's one concern I have with the Liberals here. Not defending loud and proud a fundamental liberal principle, giving us a choice. But here's another thing. Now, on the other hand, you see, Peter Dutton was absolutely right yesterday to say no, he's not going to be going to the Albanese government's Jobs Summit next month. Absolutely correct. I mean, he's the leader of the opposition. His job is to scrutinise what the government does and to offer an alternative. It's not to be part of the government. It's not healthy for a democracy when an opposition becomes complicit in a government's program, compromising its own values to reach some consensus. We want alternatives in a democracy. We want a choice. We don't want both sides arguing for the same thing. And then, if it all goes pear-shaped, covering up their joint mistakes. We need an opposition to expose them. So Dutton should not be part of the mob at this summit next month. The union bosses and the big businesses, all trying to reach some phony consensus for the rest of us on what the government should do about jobs. So Dutton made the right call, exactly the right call. I'd say exactly the same, the tables were turned and we're talking about a Labor opposition not wanting to be part of a summit, a Liberal summit. But what about Dutton's deputy opposition leader, David Littleproud, leader of the Nationals? This man actually said yes. How does that make sense? We've got the opposition leader saying no, he won't go, it's just a talk fest. His deputy leader saying, well, yes, I will go. Could be useful. It looks so messy and just gave Treasurer Jim Chalmers today a free kick at Dutton.
He goes out of his way to divide people and wreck consensus, and that's not consistent with the national appetite to see what we can achieve together by seeing that common ground, by coming together around our big economic challenges. And I think his behaviour in the last couple of days has isolated himself, humiliated himself, and it's already split the coalition.
You know what I think's going on? We've got a Liberal Party and a Nationals Party, both seem too scared to oppose, to say no to Labor's agenda and yes to their own, scarified by the loss. Now, I know there are some Liberals and Nationals MPs who do dare speak up. There's Matt Canavan, for instance, Jacinta, Nampijinpa Price. But you look at how the rest have just left Price out there. It's a fight for a key Liberal value all on her own. I'd hope that the Liberal MPs got into politics to fight for their values. Well, guys, then do it.